You made a decision, not a small one, a real one. The kind you'd been sitting with for months, turning it over, checking it from every angle, until one morning you woke up and just knew, this is right, this is what I'm doing. And then you told someone, maybe your wife, maybe a friend, maybe just a colleague at lunch. And before they even responded, before they said a single word, you started explaining, why does it make sense? Why was the timing right? Why would you think it through? Why it wasn't as risky as it sounded? Why weren't you being impulsive? You were still talking when you noticed something. The decision that felt solid that morning had started to feel soft. Not because they pushed back, they hadn't said anything yet. But somewhere in the middle of your own explanation, you began to hear yourself the way you imagined they were hearing you. And what you heard didn't sound like a man who knew what he was doing. It sounded like a man asking for permission. By the time the conversation ended, you'd talked yourself into doubt. Not them, you. Most men do this every day, with big decisions and small ones, with choices that affect years and choices that affect nothing. They explain, they justify, they preload the defense before anyone attacks. And every single time, something quiet gets handed away. The Stoics had a name for what gets handed away in those moments. They called it the ruling part of a man, the quiet center inside you that knows what is true before anyone else weighs in. Marcus Aurelius spent his entire life guarding that, not from enemies, not from critics, from the habit of explaining himself to people who never had the right to judge him in the first place. But here's what I want you to sit with right now. You already know it costs you. Every time you explain, something quieter and truer in you gets smaller. You've known this for years. So why can't you stop? Think about the last time you explained a decision nobody asked you to explain. Not a big moment, a small one. You changed your order at a restaurant and told the waiter why. You left a party early and spent 10 minutes crafting the exit. You said no to something and then immediately said, it's just that. Nobody asked, but you explained anyway. Here's what was actually happening in that moment. When you explain a decision to someone who never asked, you are placing your decision in front of them for review. You are saying, without saying it, I need you to confirm this is acceptable before I can fully own it. And the moment you do that, you have handed them something they should never have had. The right to decide whether your choice is valid. But watch what actually happens. The other person wasn't thinking about your decision at all. It wasn't on their mind. It had no weight in their world. And then you walked in and put it on the table, and now they're looking at it. Now they have an opinion. Now they're weighing it. And whatever they say next, even if it's supportive, you will measure your decision against their response. You created the jury. You handed them the verdict form. And then you're surprised when the trial begins. Epictetus understood this. He had been a slave. He knew exactly what it felt like to have your worth determined by someone else's judgment. And he spent the rest of his life making sure it never happened again. Not in chains and not in conversation. He said roughly this: the moment you place your inner world in someone else's hands, you have made yourself a slave to whatever they decide to do with it. The damage here is not dramatic. It doesn't happen in one conversation. It happens like this. You explain a decision. They respond with mild doubt. You revise to accommodate it. And over time, you stop making certain decisions altogether, because you already know they'll cost too much to explain. You didn't lose your confidence in one moment. You gave it away slowly, one explanation at a time. And the most dangerous part, the part that makes this so hard to stop, is that it feels like the right thing to do. It feels like honesty. It feels like humility. It feels like keeping people close. But here is the truth. A decision that needs constant defense was never really made. It was proposed. A man who proposes his life to others for approval is not living his life. He is auditioning it. And you have been auditioning your life for a very long time. I own my decisions before anyone hears them. You've known for years that it drains you, but knowing has never been enough to stop. Because this habit doesn't live in your head. It lives somewhere much older than that. Think back to the first time you explained yourself. Not last week, not last year. Further back than that. There was a moment, you don't remember it clearly, when you stayed quiet about a decision. You just did it. And the silence in the room afterward told you that wasn't acceptable. You were young, you learned fast. If I explain myself well enough, they won't leave. If I justify it clearly enough, they won't be angry. If I make them understand, I'll be safe. That was not a communication habit. That was a survival decision a younger version of you made in a moment of real fear. And it worked. Back then, it worked. The problem is this. You are not in that environment anymore. You haven't been for decades. But the response is still running. Automatic, instant, invisible. Every time someone questions a decision, every time you sense even the possibility of disapproval. Your nervous system still believes you are that young person in that room. And it is still trying to protect you from a danger that no longer exists. The over-explainer is not weak. He is loyal to a version of reality that expired long ago. Epictetus said roughly this: men are not disturbed by what happens to them. They are disturbed by the story they keep telling themselves about what will happen if they stop. That tightening in your chest when someone goes quiet after you speak. That automatic rush of words before you've even decided to explain. That is not a confidence problem. That is an old wound still flinching from something that isn't coming anymore. I want you to answer this in the comments, honestly. Who was the first person whose silence made you feel like you had done something wrong? You already know who it is. Their name just came to mind. That person is still in the room with you. Every time you over-explain, you are still talking to them. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself alone in the middle of the night, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The program was written for you. When you were too young to know you had a choice. You have a choice now. The voice I'm still answering. It no longer has authority over me. Not because it's far away, because it's uncomfortable in a way they don't expect. You're in a conversation. Someone questions a decision you've made. And instead of explaining, you just don't. You let the question hang in the air. You say nothing, or you say very little, and then you move on. That's it. The first time you do this, it feels wrong. Not wrong like a mistake. Wrong like standing at the edge of something. Every instinct you have says, fill this silence. Make this comfortable for them. And you don't. And nothing bad happens. That moment, that specific moment when you choose silence and survive it, is the moment the old program starts to lose its grip. Not because you've fixed anything, but because your nervous system finally has evidence that the silence is safe. That the other person's discomfort with your silence is theirs to carry, not yours to resolve. The Stoics called this the quiet refusal to spend yourself on words that serve no one. Seneca said roughly this: a man who is everywhere is nowhere. A man who explains everything owns nothing, because everything he has been placed in the hands of whoever happened to be in the room. Silence is not the absence of an answer. Silence is the answer. It says, I have considered this, I have made my choice, and I don't need you to understand it for it to be real. That is not arrogance. Arrogance needs an audience. What I'm describing needs nothing. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, kept a journal nobody was supposed to read. He made his decisions in private and lived them in public, without explanation, without defense, without needing anyone to understand. That kind of silence is not something you perform. It is something you grow into. Tonight, or the next time someone questions something you've decided, notice the moment the explanation starts to form. Notice the tightening. Notice the automatic reach for justification. Just for that one moment, don't. Let the silence be there. Let it be uncomfortable for 5 seconds. Because the man on the other side of that moment is harder to shake, harder to move, harder to talk him out of what he knows. That man was always inside you. He's been waiting for you to stop explaining him away. I am enough. Before I say a word, if just one sentence today made you think differently, don't let it be the last one. Subscribe to 365 Stories of the Wise, where wisdom finds you every single day.